Now that we're 7 months into the pandemic, how are your kids doing? Studies show that something called toxic stress is impacting our children's emotional wellness.
And, when I talk about that in the clinic with parents, they come in and you can just see it on their face. And I'm like, how's it feeling in your house? And they're like, awful. It feels like tension and stress, and the kids are stressed and upset, and I'm stressed and upset. And it's like, okay, we need to shift that. Start of the pandemic, it was like, okay, let's just get through this school year. All right, fine. We can put up with whatever for, 2.5 months. It'll be okay. But now it's like, whoa, now we're in maybe an entire school year like this. So there's a lot of this is wearing on us now. And that comes out in many different ways for kids. So if you're a parent and you're like, what is going on with my kid? Like, as time goes on and all of this, they're getting more irritable and more just sort of overreactive or tantruming more or more disrespectful talk or that kind of thing.
We talk about strategies for these pandemic times.
Making accommodations, making allowances, figuring out how to tailor this to what's going to work best for your child is 100% okay. I would argue it's necessary.
In these pandemic times, the nutrition-behavior connection is more important now more than ever.
When we make changes to their diet, it's a night and day difference. The behaviors literally disappear.
Aloha Mamas, and welcome to the CoronaMama Zoom Room. This show is brought to you by the Maui Mama magazine. And we are here for you, the Maui Mama, to help you to connect, express, and share all those things that are on our minds during this pandemic time. Our motto is #share aloha, not corona. I'm Angeline Chu Longshore, and we're picking up from last week on pandemic childhood wellness. And that's because we didn't finish our interview with Dr. Nicole. She is the holistic child psychologist, nutritionist, and former school teacher. So we're going to be talking to her today, finishing up that interview about social and emotional aspects of a child's life, our fears about our children falling behind in school, right, due to the distance learning and pandemic time, and then what's important for the learning process. But before we get to that, I want to acknowledge that now that we're past Halloween, we are fully into what I think of as the holiday season. We're coming up on Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's. And for a lot of us, that normally means family, right? We are a family culture. We're all about family. So normally we have our family fly in, or we go to the mainland or wherever they are. We have big parties with our friends and Hanai family that we've created here in the islands. So I'm not one to tell anybody what to do or what they should think or behave like. I just want you to think about it. So we're in this pandemic time, so it's going to be different. And sometimes if we don't think about it, we just fall into default mode and do what we normally do. But in this time, I just want to remind you that a lot of spread happens when we are with family, when we are having a great time as we do with our friends in big groups. And what happened recently on Lanai is the same thing. I mean, it's just what happens when we get together when there is any COVID exposure. So all I'm saying is just to think about it and don't fall into default mode. We want to recognize that, what happens here is also what happens on the mainland. And what we're seeing, we can learn from that they're doing on the mainland, or that they have done and gone through, that may not always be positive and may not always be negative. It's just some things that we're seeing as far as studies go. So there was a recent study that talked about mask wearing, and they looked at Arizona, where a lot of people were actually resistant to wearing masks. There was actually a study done on that, and the local newspaper, the Arizona Republic, reported on that. But then on June 17th, the Arizona government, local governments, they individually mandated mask wearing because of the drastic rise in numbers. It was just so bad that they said, we must do this. So just this week, or recently this month, the CDC came out with some information that showed that mask wearing, that mandate, actually stabilized the numbers, and they dropped about 2 weeks after that mandate. So, officials are saying that actually worked. And then now that people there are, kind of over it, you get to that point where you're just over, you're like, okay, enough of this. I'm not going to do this anymore. Well, they have been relaxing their protocol a little bit more, just people in general. And there wasn't that mandate of mask wearing anymore. They lifted that. And so the numbers are rising again. And so what I'm saying is that, when we get that mask fatigue, they're calling it, and we start to loosen our feelings of what we need to do to take care of ourselves and each other, then it's showing that the virus spreads. So just saying. And then, have you heard of the saying, if you have to ask, wear a mask? That's if you have to ask, wear a mask. That is what the new campaign is from Maui County about the guidelines. And they're putting that out there because, we have now a lot of tourists that are not understanding the rules. They're coming here and of course they don't know because, every state is different. Every state has different rules. So they think, oh, beaches, it's open, there's fresh air. So of course they think they can just go without a mask. But the rules actually are, if you have to ask, wear a mask. The actual rules are anyone over the age of 5 in Maui County must wear a mask, even in the open air, even at the beach. So except when you're eating, drinking, smoking. Hope you're not smoking. But if you do, wear a mask as soon as you're done, and try not to smoke so much, just for your health. Or if you're doing exercise, strenuous exercise or activities. And then, of course, if you're in the water, then you can't, you don't wear a mask. But if you're lying on the beach and you're just like lazing there in the sun, then you need to wear a mask. And I know that seems weird because we have fresh open air, but as you saw on the airborne show that I did, the virus spreads through the air, and it has been shown to do that. And it is more than 6 feet. It can be spread further than 10 feet is what people are saying, to stand far 10 feet apart now. But actually, it depends on where the airflow is. So the safest thing that the data is showing is to wear a mask. And so that's why these campaigns and these orders are being put out there, that you actually can be fined. And you can be fined up to, I believe it's $5,000 and a year in jail if you are found outdoors anywhere in public not wearing a mask. So if you have to ask, wear a mask, okay? And then also be sure to put sunscreen on your face, because if you're wearing a mask and you're laying on the beach, you're going to get striped, right? You're going to have a striped tan. All right, well, let's get back to the holidays, because I want to really think about this. Let's also consider that the amount of tourists that are coming and that we're welcoming them to the islands, we're happy to have them here. Well, their behaviors can affect us too. It affects all of us because we are literally in this together. I know that sounds corny, but we are in this together. If one person spreads it spreads, right? And we saw then on Lanai, like, we don't know. There was talk about one person who brought it back from travels, but they actually don't know exactly how it happened. But that's how it spreads. One person can spread it, and that exponentially spreads. So let's just act with that spirit of aloha and care for each other. Okay, and here's some hopeful news, something good. We talked about this a few weeks ago, the $5 Assure 19 rapid spit test. Those home kits could be approved any day now by the FDA. So remember we talked to Ian Kitajima from the company called Oceanit? Well, they have been working through the FDA application standards for emergency usage approval. And they actually plan to kick that off in Hawaii, the manufacturing. And so we may be the first to get those tests in our hands, which will be amazing. And maybe that will provide some jobs. They're all about helping the economy, this company, Oceanit, they're amazing. So what would happen is this would be used to keep our island safer with the inbound travel and tourists and anyone traveling inbound. They can be used routinely by hospital workers, school staff, and school children. And so here's what Jay Andrews of Oceanit wrote to me in an email, that Assure 19 can be used as an Aloha protocol used as a regular monitoring testing, which may not be daily in all cases. Travelers arriving to Hawaii, having taken the 72-hour test before, would test daily for around 5 days after arrival, ensuring that they didn't pick up the virus while en route. Schools, however, may need to only test twice a week in order to ensure that students don't become infectious. Ultimately, we're trying to detect and isolate, quarantine infectious people, not simply those who have COVID-19. In fact, post-infectious people are often safe to be back in public while still having trace amounts of COVID in their system, yet a positive PCR result, because of the sensitivity, often keeps them unnecessarily quarantined. And we experienced quarantine, which was so hard. My husband didn't have it, but he just quarantined anyway, and it was so hard. So on the flip side, Jay says, people who were exposed but remain asymptomatic never get tested and therefore spread the virus around. So we want to catch the virus before and during those contagious levels. So mahalo to Oceanit, the team, for their focus on making this happen for our islands, and also the rest of the country will be able to use it too. Awesome. All right, more with pandemic-related mahalos. Okay, let's get to our Actions of Aloha segment, which is always recognizing people or organizations who are helping our community with kind, generous acts of aloha. And listen to this, because you may be interested if you're out of work due to the pandemic, or if you're an employer who needs help in affording to pay for your workers. So this program is called the Aloha Connects Innovation. The Maui Economic Development Board is working with the Economic Development Alliance of Hawaii, and it's all funded by the CARES Act. So the idea is to help job seekers who have lost their jobs because of the pandemic to try something new, to take an internship position. It's a paid internship rather than a regular position, so that you can try a brand new career path. The Aloha Connects Innovation program provides financial support for individuals and businesses, paid training and employment opportunities, medical coverage, compensation for companies, and an opportunity to grow essential employable skills. The benefit to companies is you'll have subsidized full-time or part-time interns at no cost to you, guidance from the program team, monthly reimbursement to companies for mentoring and training each intern. This sounds amazing, doesn't it? So all you have to do is click the link below on the Maui Mama Magazine Facebook page show notes to apply. Mamas, here's my favorite fashion tip for you. Look at what I'm wearing. This is from armoire.style. It's like Rent the Runway, where you have an infinite closet of designer clothes to borrow from, but unlike Rent the Runway, you can keep the clothes for as long as you want and return each piece as you're done with it. So I've got a discount code for you. armoire.style/refer/CoronaMama. You can use the coupon code to get 50% off your first month's wardrobe, and you can refer a friend to get $100 off for you too. Okay, and here's something new. I want to let the busy mama know. If you would rather listen to this show as an audio podcast, you'll be able to do that soon. I'm launching the Discovery Mode podcast on Spotify and iTunes, which will run this CoronaMama series of shows, as well as other live and recorded shows that I produce, all wrapped up into one place. So for me, being in Discovery Mode means approaching life with discovery and an exploration mindset as we help to navigate our families in this life a little bit better by what we learn. So that's what it's all about. And you can join me there in mid-November. Okay, let's get back to our Zoom chat with Dr. Nicole Beurkens.
For you, whatever it is, figuring out how can I take care of that need for myself? And moms especially feel like this is so selfish, right? I should be focusing all of my attention, my energy, my effort on kids. But here's where that doesn't work. When we do that, when we focus all of our energy and attention and emotion outwards on other people, And we deprive ourselves and we deplete ourselves, especially in a situation like this of chronic ongoing stress and overwhelm, then we're not actually good for anyone, because we run ourselves dry and then we don't have anything to give. And so when we find that our kids are having a lot more frustrating behaviors, and there's just a lot more tension and sort of grumbling and animosity, and like the vibe of the home, the vibe of the family's just not feeling great, I want the adults to start with themselves and say, where can I be taking care of myself better? How can I fill my cup so that I can then manage these things better? And it really does start with us. And again, it doesn't have to be anything huge, but it's looking at, where am I depleted? Is there something? Is there one even small thing that I can tweak or, adapt or change in some way to take better care of my own needs, emotionally, relationally, physically? And then that has an overflow effect. So I think that focusing on us as the adults, and then the modeling. When we model healthy coping behaviors and just physically and mentally healthy behaviors for ourselves, guess what? Our kids pick up on that. So when you are, use that beautiful example of saying, oh, here's how I am feeling. Okay, here's how I can problem solve that, or here's what I can do. Your kids are picking up on that. So when we're stressed and we say, oh, I'm going to, go for a run, or I'm going to take a bubble bath, or I'm going to, call my friend, or whatever it might be, we're modeling for them healthy acknowledgement of what's going on in us and some healthy coping strategies. And that also starts with us. Any mentally or physically healthy behaviors that we want our kids to exhibit has to start with us. If I feel like my kids are grumpy because their face is in front of a screen the entire day for school, and then their face is in their, smartphone the rest of the time, and I'm getting on them about, you need to do other things, put the phone down. But every time they look at me, I've got my phone up, my computer's up, I've got my laptop here, my iPad here, I'm scrolling here. Not going to happen, right? So whether it's whatever it might be, we need to be the models. I always say, as parents, we need to go first, So in this case, that means taking care of ourselves and modeling those healthy problem solving skills, modeling those behaviors. That has an incredible effect then on helping children learn from and start to implement those same things in their own life.
There was one thing that you said that I love, is about the vibe of the home.
Yeah.
And, we can do those things to look at ourselves. And what's maybe a little bit easier, because moms want to do things for our families, is I'm thinking, if we look at the vibe of the home, that can tell us where we need to pick up and problem solve in ourselves. Yeah. Because if the child is on their device and you're like, what vibe are they feeling? Yeah. And in this social emotional urgent time of we're in the home a lot, they're not getting a lot of external environmental from school or friends input. The vibe is coming from the home. Yeah. So what vibe do you want to set? I mean, maybe it's just that question. What vibe do you want your social emotional, the experience for that child to be? And how can you set that tone? And it's not scolding, and it's not, checking in to discipline.
Right.
It's maybe, it could be the same thing in checking in on them, but it's sort of underneath that of, how can you do it in a way that feels nurturing or supportive, or, so for every family, it's going to be different. It's just like whatever vibe they want to set.
I think being aware of that is key. And when I talk about that in the clinic with parents, they come in and you can just see it on their face. And I'm like, how's it feeling in your house? And they're like, awful. It feels like tension and stress, and the kids are stressed and upset, and I'm stressed and upset. And it's like, okay, we need to shift that, right? And I'll give you one really simple thing. This takes like no time or energy. This is something everybody can do. One thing that starts to shift to a more positive relational and emotional vibe in the home is being intentional about at least once a day, although 3 times is even better, but once a day is great. Spotlighting something that you appreciate about your child, that you see them doing well with. Spotlight something positive. So it could be something like, oh, I really appreciated when you helped your sister load the dishwasher this morning, or I really appreciated that you brushed your teeth without me having to remind you, or oh, your teacher sent this email and I love that poem that you wrote for English class, or whatever it might be. And if you feel like you can't find, something within the day, spotlight something you appreciate about them. Oh, I love that you always come and give me a hug before bed. I love that. So being intentional at least once in every 24-hour period of just, I call it spotlighting, like just shining a big spotlight on even just one positive thing. And that really is a great technique for just starting to shift the vibe of things, because so often we get stuck in the negative. And, there have been studies done on that, looking at recording and tallying the amount of what we would call like negative versus positive sort of communications or relationship bids between parents and kids, or between partners in the home. And very often, especially during stressful periods of time, you just get these tally marks that are endless for the negative bids or the negative comments or things, and very few in the positive. And that's got to shift if we want to have a healthier vibe for ourselves and for them. So just that spotlighting even one thing a day is a great starting point for that. And it doesn't take any time. It just takes the intention. I'll have some parents write that on a little index card and put it on the fridge, or, whatever, just as a reminder. I have actually had a few dads who have set a reminder in their phone. I had a mom who did that too, actually, now that I think about it, because they were realizing that it would get to the end of the day and they would have totally forgotten about it. And so they would just set a reminder. Like, I'm thinking of one dad that I had a conversation with in particular, and he just set the reminder in his phone for about a little bit after he would get home from work each day, and the reminder would pop up, and then it would trigger for him in, the next hour or so to look for something, or to make sure that he sought out each of his kids. He happened to have 3 kids, and spotlight something. And what a nice, lovely, just relationship building and emotionally supportive moment to have with each of our kids. And if we think back on it, we can go mindlessly through so many days without spotlighting anything positive. And so that's just like one little transformational tool that families of kids with any age can start to do.
Oh, that is so good. I think about the moms who, we have the best intention of wanting the best for our kids. So we're trying to corral them, and we're trying to get them on task. And, and so that vibe, when I look at the difference between the vibes of what you just put out as a possibility, I can see how, we're in this time of shifting everything. And so I think children are maybe more adaptable right now, because they know that we have to shift also.
Yeah.
So to be able to shift in that way of not looking at what they need to do and how can I protect them and how can I corral them and make sure they're on task. And instead, I was thinking about how you talked about that in relationships too. I had read something, it has to do with my own relationship with my husband. I'd read something about John Gottman. I think you probably have heard of him.
Yeah.
And sort of the bid, or I'm trying to remember how he put it, but what happened for me in my relationship is taking interest in what my husband was doing and acknowledging that in a way that it was seeing him.
Yeah.
So it was like, and I don't know how exactly John Gottman put it, but in having a conversation that was with him and not at him is what it felt like to me.
That's right.
Right. So it's like, oh, what is that? Oh, interesting. That's really cool. And then pointing out the things that you see that are interesting, that his particular skill set, or, something that he brings to that thing that's happening, that you're seeing his beauty, his genius, his whatever makes him feel seen. and that you're in it together looking at what's happening. Because I feel like, especially with boys and men, like being the way that they communicate is not so much like this, it's like this side by side. Yeah. And so I feel like for that, I don't know, the shift in what you're talking about, it's the perfect time to shift that and to feel like we're with them, you know, rather than talking at them, which I think is the difference that you're talking about.
Right. Well, and we really need to, because we are spending, many of us are spending a lot more time with and around our kids. You know, going back to what we were talking about earlier with the dynamics of just the logistics of families, even we used to spend a lot more time apart, right? Yep. Kids would head out to school first thing in the morning. If they have sports or music after, like we wouldn't see them during the day. Like, so that's all different now for many of us. And so just even, you know, all of the time that we're spending together lends itself towards maybe the vibe before wasn't so great, but because we weren't all together as much of the time, it was sort of like, you know, not a big deal. Well, now 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, it's sort of like, oh, what can we do about that? And it's never a lost cause. And some of, you know, I'm trying to provide some simple things of, because sometimes people feel like, oh my gosh, like, how am I going to shift that? Or that's like such a big thing. It's like, it just starts with little moments. And I love what you shared. You know, John Gottman does talk about those bids and just being attentive to one another. And we get into these routines so much about all of our interactions, whether it's with our partner or our kids, are around the what needs to get done. And so your example was great of like just sitting down with our partner and going, tell me something that's interesting to you right now, or show me what you're working on. And it's not about anything that needs to get done for the house. And it's not about the schedule for the rest of the week. And it's not about what I want you to do. It's just about taking interest in one another. And so again, that's one of the silver linings of a time like this, is that it does allow for us to be more aware of connecting in that way if we choose to, you know, be aware of that. And we choose to say, let me experiment with how that might be different. And, you know, the thing about spotlighting one positive thing or one thing you appreciate, that's a great thing to use with partners too. Right. You know, of just, hey, I really appreciated this, or I love when you do that, or that meant a lot to me, or, you know, whatever, just one thing a day even can start to shift our relationship and our vibe, you know, with our partner in a positive way. So these things work for kids and adults.
Right. I see my husband or my child perk up when I notice something. They're like, you see it in their body. They're just like, oh, you're seeing me. You're seeing something good, rather than that kind of thing.
And they've had so many of their normal relating kinds of things taken away. I mean, even they're in school, but if they're in school online all the time or hybrid, we all know, I mean, moms and dads, we've seen those classes. These are not normal, like, it's not the same as being in school, right? You just see the dynamics are different. They're not getting the same communication or connection with their teacher or with their classmates, certainly not with their friends. And so we want to be intentional where we can about trying to give them some positive touchstones, as well as making sure that we're helping them stay connected to people in their lives that are important, you know, to them, whatever that can look like safely at this point. And that kind of changes too. And I suspect we're coming into, at least for those of us who live in climates that are going to get colder, we're coming into a time that's going to be another more challenging time for our kids, as far as not being able to do all of the outdoor activities safely, you know, to do social things that they've done all summer and all fall. So we're going to have to look at, again, dealing more with what we were dealing with back at the start of the pandemic when it was still not great weather. So we're heading into another shift here too. And we don't know what the pandemic is going to bring, what the rules are going to be for that. But the need to stay flexible and the need to continue to help problem solve those things with our kids to the extent that we can, to help them get those connections and those activities and those things that are important to them. But I mean, if there's one thing we've learned about this, it's that we just have to stay really flexible and adaptable, because none of us has control over what's coming next. And again, what a beautiful opportunity to have that spotlighted, and to help our kids develop skills for that. Not that any of us would have chosen this as a way to teach our kids flexibility and resilience, but when we, like, even sometimes when I just get so frustrated, like, I can just give a personal example. My son, who is a freshman in college, he was days away from moving into his dorm and starting his life on campus, and the school totally went back on their plans, shut everything down, said it's all going to be virtual, nobody moves to campus. There's a grieving that goes along with those things for our kids, right? I mean, on their part, on our part. And so it's like, we got to stay flexible. We have to, be adaptable. Now they've said, okay, come January, our full plan, our intention is for you to be able to move to campus. We're going to go back to classes online. And we're going, okay, we've been here once before. Like, so how can we as parents and he as, a young adult walk that line of, I want to stay optimistic and hopeful, and I want to be able to plan for that. And at the same time, how do I help myself, be realistic and recognize that there might be disappointment, there might be change again. These are all really important life skills and coping skills, but it's hard. It's a hard thing. And I think we're heading into, again, this season, holidays and all of that coming up, it's going to be different. And so I think for us to start thinking about some of that now of, okay, the next few months may be ups and downs and back and forth and more restrictions again. Holidays are going to look different. How can we navigate that? Because I think that's coming.
On this island and the Hawaiian Islands, it's a little bit different. We have a situation where we have had a travel ban. So we've been trying to control what's been going on our islands.
Yep.
And it just opened up because we need the economy to come back.
Yeah.
So we're experiencing now a lot of fear from the influx of tourism, which is warranted. I mean, cases are spiking on the mainland and even in Europe, and we get, and Asia, we get from travelers from everywhere.
Yeah.
So that's where we are right now. Yeah. And we're with school, some are 100% distance learning and have opened up just to a little bit more blended. But we may have to go back in.
That's right.
I mean, depending on the cases, and the rises of cases. So we are similar to that in it. We don't know. And there's still that it's not over, and it can get crazy. And that social emotional part, I think, for young adults, for teens, for young kids, when things are so different, I maybe if there's any insight with that, because the distance learning, I know, is so hard for children. They don't have the peripheral vision of all their classmates where they can sense what's happening. They can make body language gestures to feel together. I see that with my kids. And for my 13-year-old, my younger one, he's sort of a taskmaster, so he just does what he needs to do. My 13-year-old has been having a harder time with distance learning. So I realized that, he would just shut down. Like it's not because he doesn't want to, but the nature of the electronics of how he has to concentrate with it doesn't vibe with him because there's no social emotional support in person.
And his learning style's different.
It's totally different. So I had his best friend cohort with him where we go to each other's houses to distance learn. Where they're at a private school, so they have the lessons coming in online, and that's only 2 days a week now. But it helps so much because I see when they see each other, there's like this, and the relaxation of just seeing a friend, and they're in it together, and they sometimes roll their eyes or make jokes together, and that's what we want. And so in what you're seeing, and maybe there's some advice that you have for the distance learning, because I know you hear all about it and all the different things that are happening.
I think to just realize that this distance learning is great for certain types of kids. As you mentioned, your younger one who's like, just give me the list of what to do and I am going to get through it. It's great for them. And those tend to be the kids, like, you know, there's online schools that operate under normal circumstances, and those kids do, you know, choose those kinds of environments. They do great. But there are lots of kids where, for various reasons, that doesn't align with their learning style. It doesn't align with their personality style. And it's really hard. And we couple that with most teachers have not been well trained in how to teach and deliver the curriculum online, which is not their fault. So we just, you know, and that's what I said, you know, at the start of the pandemic, it was like, okay, let's just get through this school year. All right, fine. We can put up with whatever for, you know, 2.5 months. It'll be okay. But now it's like, whoa, now we're in maybe an entire school year like this. So there's a lot of concerns. And I think the big anxiety that I hear from parents around it is, I have to make my child do all of this. Like, they're going to get behind. This is going to be bad. You know, the older ones, they're saying, oh my gosh, their college resume is not going to look as good. Like, their transcript's not going to be as good. And for the younger ones, they're not going to learn to read, or they're going to have to repeat a grade. I just want to encourage everybody to take a deep breath and slow down with all of that. And I say this as somebody who was a teacher and who now is a psychologist. So I've worked all the parts of this. Nothing is going to happen one way or the other educationally with your child over the course of this period of time that is going to make or break them. Really, I promise you, it's not.
So good to hear.
Right. And I just really, like, when I say that to families in the clinic, I just, like, sometimes there's tears or just this big deep breath. It's like, just slow down. As long as you are, you know, as long as you haven't decided during this period of time to raise your kid alone in a cave where they're not getting any stimulation from anything, they're still learning and they're going to do just fine. It's not appropriate for a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, 7-year-old to be sitting for hours on end in front of the computer for reading lessons, for writing lessons. So you know what? If that's not working for them, turn the computer off or get what you can from that, and then make sure you're reading some books to them during the day. Have them help you make a grocery list. Give them some colored pencils and a paper and tell them to go draw and write you a little story. Give them some audiobooks to listen to. Have them help you cook dinner or put the groceries away or do the laundry or go outside and play or build with Legos. All of those things are developmentally so important for their learning process, and they are going to get so much more learning value out of those kinds of things than fighting with them and struggling to make them sit in front of something that's not working well for them. So that's for the younger kids. For the older ones, if they're really struggling, find some alternatives. Say, let's do what we can with this, and we're not going to do all those homework problems, because you know what, if you can do 4 of them and show me that you know what you're doing, we don't need to sit here and do the rest, and I'll let your teacher know. To get them off the hook sometimes. Say, you know, we need to work more movement into this. This isn't working for you to go from one class to another. Let's talk with your teacher about what we can do there. Let's make sure we're building some breaks into your day. Let's get the actual textbooks, or let's find you, you know, if you have a learning style where you need some things right in front of you, let's see what we can print out. Let's do that instead of all of it on the screen. Or, you know, we're going to forget about these couple of things for right now, and we're going to do some other stuff instead. I want parents to realize that making accommodations, making allowances, figuring out how to tailor this to what's going to work best for your child is 100% okay. I would argue it's necessary. We need to be doing that for them, and that makes their lives better, and it makes our lives better too. I see too many families where there's so much stress and arguing and tension over trying to get kids to do things that honestly are not that important or helpful in the first place. So as long as your kids are engaged in real world activities and learning, that's where it's at. That is where it's at. And guess what? If you have a high schooler and you are really stressed out about what's going to happen for them for college, step back and recognize every single other high schooler right now around the world is in the same situation. Colleges know what's going on. Like everybody is aware. And so they're not going to look at your child's transcript or resume of activities and say, well, gosh, why weren't you involved in 17 things between, March and December of 2020? They know why. Oh, right. We were all living through a pandemic. So back off on your kids with the stress over that stuff. They're going to be okay. And honestly, if they focus and do a lot more learning independent life skills, I would love to see millions of middle schoolers and high schoolers during this time, instead of sitting in front of the computer doing endless assignments, I'd love to see them learning how to develop some cooking skills, learning how to do their laundry, learning how mom or dad balance the checkbook and do their banking online, learning how to shop for things, learning how to incorporate some physical activity and movement into their day. These are the real benefits. And it's easy for me to say, having worked with kids from little ones all the way through adulthood, to say what really matters is often not what we focus on with them, especially around school. But I can honestly say that if your kids are engaged in things right now, they're going to be fine. And so if you are really stressing out over the school piece of it and all of that, I want to give you permission to just back away from that and just reset and take a deep breath, let your kids breathe for a bit, focus on some other things, and then see what you want to do from there.
Mm-hmm. I think that's such a relief for parents to hear right now. I mean, there's so much worry that they're falling behind. I think that falling behind thing is a huge thing. And for what I've noticed for my children, especially the 13-year-old, is I just had to ask him I asked both of them, how are they feeling about the workload? How are they feeling? Is it overwhelming? Is it too much? Why is it too much? What's too much? Let's look at that, and see, is it doable or not, or not really serving them. I think about serving them. And we had a conversation about the big picture with the 13-year-old. Like, well, I had a conversation like, what's really important in the end? It's not the little assignment that you've completed. And in this pandemic time, like you said, everyone's going through this. So if you don't complete that assignment, it's not going to be check forever on a mark on your life. And to have that relationship with the child where they feel like you're on their side and really listening to say, what is it that you need? Then, it's so true. You can say to the teacher, well, this feels like too much. Is it really important? And if it is, okay, we'll do it. But oftentimes the teacher will say, yeah, I get it. Right now, they'll say, I get it.
That's right.
And if you need a tutor or something because it's really important, then you do that or you spend time with your child. But I think, like you said, the silver lining is that we have to pay attention more. We have to be with our children more. And I think some people call it like learning coaches with our children. But I also see it as like sort of going back to what's beautiful about the olden times of we sort of had to incorporate our children into our daily lives and be part of the whole structure of the family and what happens. And we got away from that. And we all sort of isolated into our devices. And so it's like, really now we're forced, but there's a silver lining in that, like, okay, well, now that the pandemic's here, we need to do this. And it's actually beautiful. So like to shift into that and kind of embrace it, because even though it's different and it's new, it actually feels kind of good. I think a lot of people are saying that. They're like, I don't know why, but it feels so good being home.
Absolutely.
And like
kind it's of slowing down.
Go down
and
that.
I wrote an article towards the beginning of the pandemic, probably about a month in, and the gist of it was, what if this pandemic was the best thing to ever happen to kids? And I mean that from the standpoint of it's really shaken us up to recognize how fast paced had our life gotten, and how connected were we really? And what were we doing just because we thought we were supposed to do it to keep up, or because everybody else was doing it, or more is better? And this has really shaken it up and forced us to slow down and go, what's actually important here? What's actually important? And of course, families who have been longtime homeschoolers laugh at all the rest of us because they're like, you're discovering what we've known all along. And what are you doing spending 7 hours a day in front of the computer learning? We've known forever that you can get your learning, your academics done in a couple of hours a day. Like, it's been interesting talking with our homeschool families here at the clinic. They're like, yeah, this is how we live anyway. And what we know is that by prioritizing some of these other, activities and things, our kids turn out, they turn out just fine. So, but I do think that collective slowing down, and if we allow ourselves to settle into that and say, what are the real benefits here, instead of constantly thinking about it in terms of this gap of like what we're missing out on, or all the things that our kids should be doing, to go, but where's the beauty and the benefit of what we're all getting out of this right now? There's some tremendous benefits, and some families are going to stick with this for sure. I mean, I have heard that time and time again, families saying, you know what, when things go back to normal in the world, we're not going to go back to how we did things. We're going to do school differently, or we're going to manage our schedule differently, or, this has shown us a different way that's actually working better for us, or that we feel like is healthier for us and our kids. And some families will go back into more of the normal things, but hopefully with an eye for only putting back into their lives what actually serves them and what works. And to be more choosy about that now, because we've had this stark situation where we've been able to look at what the norm was and what it's like now and say, okay, I've got this new foundation now. What do I want to put back into my life? And what a beautiful opportunity, really, to be able to do that.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's so awesome. I also want to get into, because I know you have that, background of nutrition and looking at the child in the physical way. Right now, we are in a whole different time where children are not getting a lot of physical activity. There's something about that I feel like, you probably have insight on how to manage that without being forceful and get outside, do something, which is what I'm hearing parents say.
Right. Time and place for that, for sure. Right. That's sometimes taking care of ourselves, right? I need you to be outside now. I need you to not be where I am right now. Go outside and play. One of the things that I focus on, for parents to understand, but that I talk with even young kids about, is that moving your body, and I tend to use the word movement, not exercise. Exercise has such a negative connotation for so many people. So I talk with even kids about how moving your body is so important for your brain to work well. And that's especially true for kids. For babies through young adults, movement drives brain development. So I tell kids, if you want to be more focused and have school be easier, you need to be moving your body throughout the day. If you want to sleep better and have a better mood, you need to be moving your body throughout the day. And then there's the physical benefits too. But for so many kids, it's like, oh, that's important for my brain, And so I think a few things with movement right now are, make sure that you're building enough breaks for movement into the school day if they are doing virtual school. Okay. Because that sitting in front of the computer, especially for long periods of time, the brain needs a reset. And the quickest way to reset is to get some movement in. So that could look like even kids getting movement while they're doing their schoolwork, maybe sitting on a big exercise ball to bounce on, or maybe standing at the computer and pacing. It might look like setting a timer for every 20 minutes and getting up and, moving around. It may look like between classes, going outside and just riding the bike around the driveway. Make a plan, just like you kind of make a plan in the morning for, okay, here's the schoolwork for today, or here's, the school schedule for today. Work in some movement. Young kids, so little ones through the elementary years really need to be taking a break and having some kind of movement away from the computer every 20 to 25 minutes.
Okay.
And for our older ones, our middle schoolers and up, every 45 to no more than 50 minutes. And actually, that's pretty true for adults too. All the studies show that really we get diminishing returns after about 50 minutes of focusing on any kind of thoughtful, learning oriented kind of activity. You're better off taking a 5-minute break to move around and reset yourself and then come back to it than pushing through for another hour or two and not getting very far. So I talk with my middle schoolers and high schoolers and college age kids about that a lot, of like studying, for example. Don't just push yourself endlessly. Set the timer for 40 to 45 minutes. Then get up, take a break for 10, 15 minutes, go walk around, move around, call a friend, have a snack, like whatever you're going to do, and then come back to it. So I think building in those breaks and talking with kids about what kind of movement works well for you. And if you're realizing that your child moves a lot while they're doing their schoolwork and so many parents are freaking out about that. And I'm like, they've always done that. You just didn't notice it because you weren't with them for the day. That actually is a very developmentally appropriate thing, especially for younger kids. I had a mom just this morning who was like, it's like his leg and his body doesn't stop moving when he's filling out his worksheets. And I'm like, right, that's actually a normal thing. The harder he's thinking, the more his body is moving to help facilitate that. So we do something really unhelpful in the classroom and at home when we tell kids, stop moving around, sit still and listen to that. Well, for many kids, the moving is part of what's keeping their brain activated so that they can listen and focus and get their work done. Now, we want to give them a structured way to do that. If your kid is running around the house, then they're not focusing on what they're doing. But if we tape a spot off on the floor for them to pace and walk around in, or we give them a big bouncy exercise ball to sit on, they absolutely can have that movement then while they are listening to the lesson or working on their assignment. So just look for opportunities to build movement into the normal part of the day. And then I'm big on family movement, especially if kids aren't motivated to be very physically active on their own. Everybody walks the dog after dinner. And again, that's that parent modeling, right? I'm going for a walk. This is important for me and my mental health and physical health. So we're all going to go, or we're going to go for a bike ride, or we're going to go play tag in the backyard, or we're going to build an obstacle course with, cushions and whatever in the basement. And we're going to do that. Even just 10 to 15 minutes of some family movement together is a great way for everybody to get some benefit. So that's just a few ideas of how you can work that in.
I love that. Okay, we're going to build a family routine, and we're we're going to take breaks. Those are really great things to think about.
Awesome.
Yeah, and we were talking about earlier behavior, and some kids act out, and some kids do this and that, and I know that you have thoughts on that as far as nutrition goes also.
Yeah, for sure. Nutrition, food intake is a very overlooked piece of the puzzle when we look at kids' mood, behavior, attention, those kinds of things. So we know just on a general basis for kids and adults who don't have any kind of diagnosis, what we eat impacts our mood, our focus, our sleep, all of that. And then for kids who do have a diagnosis, maybe they have a diagnosis of something like ADHD or autism spectrum disorder or anxiety disorder or some kind of behavioral disorder. We have studies in all of those domains showing the positive impact of improving nutrition status and nutrient levels on the symptoms of all of those conditions. So food is really something that we need to look at. And I know that parents have a tendency to go, oh, that's overwhelming, or, oh, I can't change my child's diet. You can start with some basics. One simple one is recognizing that hydration is key. Study after study has shown that the majority of kids are going through their day with some level of dehydration, not getting enough water intake. And even mild dehydration reduces test scores in studies. It makes focus and attention worse. It increases irritability. So just focusing on having a water bottle accessible. And if you have a family that's really oriented towards drinking, sugary juices, soda pops, things like that, just starting to pull back and replace some of those with some water. Having the water bottle there, give kids a fun, crazy straw to drink out of. That makes it more exciting. Add some fruit to it, something like that. But just really working on getting hydration going, and that helps with the learning pieces, but certainly helps with the behavior too. And then another simple one to look at is how much sugar are our children getting throughout the day. A new study that came out just yesterday, again, showing that fructose has a very negative effect on kids' behavior in several domains: impulsivity, hyperactivity, irritability, their risk-taking kinds of behavior. So we want to be thinking about that. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to go to like instantly and all natural. I'm cooking everything from home and throwing out everything in my pantry. No, I'm a mom of four. I get it. But you can start making some swaps. You can look in your pantry and say, what are the snacks that we tend to have on hand? Look at how many grams of sugar are in them. You'll be shocked, bearing in mind that the max that kids ideally should be having between the ages of 2 and 18 is 25 grams of added sugar in a day. That might sound like a lot until you start looking at most kids' breakfast cereals and you see that they can get 18 grams just in that. A can of soda. Yeah, a little yogurt, exactly. 13 to 14 grams there. Many crackers, baked good, like so much stuff. Juices can easily have a child's entire serving of added sugar for the day in 1 8-ounce cup of juice. So you want to start looking at that and saying, oh, what could we start swapping for here? Oh gosh, could we find a fruit snack that has fewer grams of added sugar? Can we find some cereals that, have less? Doesn't need to be perfect, but you're just focusing on these incremental steps. And the reason that looking at sugar is such a good starting point is because it tends to be everywhere in kids' diets. So it gives us something that we can take lots of action on. But when kids are on this blood sugar roller coaster all day long of this, and for us too, sugar rush and then crash, and then sugar rush and then crash, that is very detrimental for mood, for anxiety, for learning, for focus and attention, for all of that. So we want to focus on stabilizing that blood sugar more. And saying, how can we stop having these sugar spikes and crashes? And how can we start feeding our kids things that keep the blood sugar more stable? And giving them a package of fruit snacks that has 4 grams of sugar in it instead of 14, that's a simple starting point for that. Or saying, gosh, we're doing a lot of packaged, processed stuff all the time. Where are a couple areas? Can we maybe do some fresh fruit? Kids tend to be more on board with fruit than veggies. So even starting, with some fruit kinds of things, or just going to more water, or just saying, gosh, instead of going to the drive-through so many times during the week, we're going to look at, is there even one time a week where we could make something at home together, whatever it might be. But just being aware that what we feed our kids does make a difference for their brain function, and not only their physical health, but their mental health. And then just starting to make some small changes from there. It's a good thing to be thinking about.
I'm thinking about the mama at home wondering, like, does that really make a difference? Do I have to, so if you have certain cases that you've seen, I want to hear about them, where you have seen a child doing this kind of behavior and then what changes happen, because that makes it more real.
Yeah. Diet can have a profound change for some children. I have had children at my clinic and who I have consulted with over the years who have literally gone from very, very significant symptoms of things like panic disorder or severe ADHD or severe behavior problems, who, when we make changes to their diet, it's a night and day difference. The behaviors literally disappear. That is how profound an effect food and nutrients can have. Now, that is not the case for every child. Some kids, we see some mild to moderate improvement where parents will go, once we cut down on the sugar, and, the added chemicals and the dyes, we went from, 10 severe tantrums a week to, now we're having one or maybe two. Okay. Does that sound like it would be, a benefit? Sure.
Mm-hmm.
So, or my kid went from punching holes in the wall and being super physically aggressive to now, maybe he'll lie down on the floor and, argue or get upset, but he's not harming people or property anymore. It's a pretty significant change. Didn't 100% solve the issue, but it brought it down in intensity. So I have never had a child in all of my years of practice who's shifting their diet to a more brain and body supportive diet has not had some benefit. And even if there was a child who we didn't see any kind of immediate short-term benefit with, the benefits of making these diet shifts in the long term is huge, because this entire generation of children is they're guinea pigs in a lot of ways. But one of the ways is just growing up from preconception through young adulthood in an environment with a lot more toxins in food, a lot more processed foods, a lot less real whole foods. So we don't know actually what the long-term impact is, but what we're seeing from our generation, those of us who are parenting, our generation, and even millennials who are parenting, what we're seeing is more chronic health problems over time, earlier onset of all kinds of mental health issues, dementias, those kinds of things, rampant rates of depression, anxiety, all of that. And that tracks with food changes that started to happen, in our generation. So it's important to not dismiss that. And most of the time, people intuitively know that there's got to be something to that. Where we put a wall up is the overwhelm of, if I acknowledge that, then that means I really should do something about that. And that feels hard. Mm-hmm. And I get that. Mm-hmm. So I think that just taking it one step at a time, I would rather that you make 20 tiny steps that take a year to make and get to somewhere better at the end of that year than feeling like you have to do it all at once, going all in for a week, overwhelming yourself and your kids, and then going, forget it, we're going back to the old way, mm-hmm. right? It's like much better, like with any change or habit that we're trying to develop, just start with something small, start with something that feels doable. Maybe that's just watering your child's juice down. Maybe you've got a kiddo who drinks a ton of juice during the day, and you say, you know what? Each day I'm just going to put a little more water into that to start watering it. Great. If that's what feels doable as a starting point, awesome. Like, you don't have to be all in at the beginning, but I think to realize that it can make a profound difference. And really the mood stabilization and the sleep are the two areas that most parents report most quickly when they get their kids on more of a consistent eating schedule, when they're doing more water as opposed to other beverages, when they're focusing more on whole food instead of all the processed, sugary, chemical-filled stuff. Parents will most often report that their child just seems to mellow out, not be so edgy. That's one thing that people notice quickly. More focused. Especially now, parents can see that more than just during the homework time. If your kids are at home, they're like, oh, it just seems able to like stick with things longer, kind of brain seems to be turned on and engaged more. And then the sleep, a lot of kids struggle with not being able to wind down well for sleep or not being able to sleep well. And that's another area where parents report fairly quickly seeing changes. So, yeah, I can give you dramatic case studies of like kids who were having really severe problems who did a 180 as a result of significant diet changes. But then there's lots of stories of just the, kids who don't have severe issues, but just made nice, consistent improvements as we made even some minor diet changes.
That's so awesome. I can just feel the sense of relief that a lot of moms would have, even with those incremental changes. Just even if it's a micro level of less edginess, it's like, I don't have to deal with that now. Right. So it's really worth it.
Absolutely. And for all of us, right? Because I advocate that we make these changes for the entire family. I am not a proponent of making changes just for one person, especially not a child. So that's how you model and get them on board too. We're all going to do this. You put it on yourself, say, man, I have realized like I have not been eating as much produce as I should. Like I'm noticing that, gosh, I've gone days without really, eating many fruits or vegetables. I'm noticing that that's not feeling as good to me. I want to focus on that. I'm going to make sure we have more of these things. Let's be intentional. We're all going to, make sure that we have something on our plate at lunchtime or whatever it might be. Start from you and talking about this is good for all of us. And this is supportive not only of physical, because so often people think of it as managing their weight or things like that, but really about the brain and our relationships and how food impacts our functioning in lots of ways. But be the model and start with yourself, and then let it flow from there.
That is such a different approach to the reason why we're going to pay attention to our eating and our child's eating that not a lot of people think about. And I think it's because you coming from a teacher perspective, a mom perspective, a psychologist perspective, seeing all the different areas that parents deal with things, struggle with things, it gives us a more well-rounded picture because you have all of that to bring to it.
Yeah.
So that's why you're the holistic child psychologist or wellness advocate.
There you go.
And so that's so awesome. Now, is there anything that I missed asking you that you think is like glaringly important to say about what we're dealing with the pandemic and any kind of advice you might have for parents?
I think we touched on so many important aspects of that. I think it really just goes back to take stock of what you feel like is working or not working well right now, and then just stay aware of and committed to continuing to make even small shifts with the stuff that's not working to see if you can get that, working any better. But also acknowledging all the things that are going well and the changes that you have made and how well you all have done in the midst of this, allowing yourself, especially as a mom or a dad, to recognize that, I think is really important.
Okay. That is so awesome. I feel like we got just a huge download of just golden information from all these various areas that you have expertise in. So now, if you're into it, I'd like to do something really fun with guests because I think doing a little lightning round Q&A about your personal practices. Experts know it all. And then we think, oh, they're so like amazing, And so it helps for us to see that people struggle or do human things. And then also I've seen that I just learn from these questions. So are you willing to get into that?
Absolutely. Let's do it. We're all just humans. Let's hear what you got for me.
Okay. So what's your favorite healthy breakfast, lunch, and dinner?
So for breakfast, I like to make energy bites, just simple recipe. I've even got it on my website, some oats, some nuts, some honey, some nut butter, different things all mixed together. They're easy to grab and go. I love that. For lunch, I will typically do some kind of salad of greens, whatever veggies we have around. And then I like to throw either salmon, tuna, if we have leftover, meat or something from the night before, I throw it on there. That tends to be my lunch. Dinner, we home cook dinner almost every night. My husband does the cooking, which is awesome.
Oh, wow.
We tend to do usually a meat, a vegetable, some kind of whole grain. Salmon is one of my favorites. So I would say if I was going to make something, that would probably be what it is.
Awesome. Yum. Well, I just learned, how you do it. I'm like, okay, I'm on track. I feel better. Okay. What's your favorite place to buy groceries and why?
The first thing that came to mind was Thrive Market online. I love Thrive Market. They have so many of the brands that we use that don't have a lot of extra ingredients in them. They have a lot of organic. In my family, we do have to eat gluten and dairy free because of some allergies and sensitivities. So Thrive just makes it super easy for me to order everything that we need. So I would say that's my favorite.
How cool. I've never heard of that. I'll check it out.
Yes.
So, how many hours of sleep do you need and how much do you actually get?
I absolutely am a girl who needs 7.5 to 8 hours of sleep. I need it, and therefore I make sure that I get it. I
You're so
have had
awesome.
times in my life, especially with, having babies and things like that, where I did not get enough. But for me to function well in my life, I really consistently need 7.5 to 8. So I do
Mm.
prioritize that.
So, you're saying for those with young kids, they can give themselves a little slack because with babies, you just.
Babies are going to do what babies are going to do. You're up and you're sleep deprived. But that's why I'm also a fan of helping them learn how to get into good sleep routines as soon as they can, because we need to get sleep too. But yes, I mean, it totally depends on the ages and stages of your kids. But at this point in my life, 7.5 to 8, I can prioritize it. And I make sure that I shut my work down or whatever else, because at seasons in my life when I have not prioritized that, it's not been good for me physically or mentally. So that's just something I know about myself, that my sleep needs to be a priority for me.
Awesome. Okay. Do you have a meditative or calming practice?
I'm a big fan of mindfulness, various types of mindfulness practices. I actually, over the last year, have gotten into using the Headspace app. There's lots of them out there, but that's one that I like and use pretty regularly.
Okay, cool. That is meditation?
Yeah, it's mindfulness meditation. Yep.
Okay.
Headspace. It's a great app.
Okay, cool. If you do have a guilty pleasure when it comes to food or really anything, what is it and how much do you allow yourself to indulge?
I'm a big fan of chocolate, any and all things chocolate. Food wise, that's definitely my guilty pleasure. I actually have a square or two of dark chocolate most days at some point. I don't do the dairy, so dark chocolate is great. But yeah, if we're eating out somewhere or if it's like a special occasion or whatever, I'm all in for whatever the chocolate thing is.
Okay, so you do get that in and feel.
Absolutely. Everything, yeah, I'm not about deprivation at all. And I feel like when we are mindful about how we eat in supporting our brain and body in good ways with our food intake the majority of the time, it gives us this window of time where we can not, make maybe the most health supportive choices, and it's okay.
Give ourselves a break a little bit. A
Absolutely.
little bit.
Yes.
Okay. If there were something, no, the thing, is there one thing that you've done with your family that you wish you knew before, or you think that everyone should know that would help them out?
hmm I think this goes back to food. The first thing that popped into my head was, if I had known 20 years ago what I know now about nutrition and food and kids' brains and bodies, I would have done things quite differently when my kids were young. Just in terms of not doing so many of the sugary packaged snacks and things. Like I would have done some things differently with that early on, but I don't harp on it because I'm a big believer in we do the best we can with what we know at the time. And then as we learn and grow and evolve more, then we shift. And that's totally okay. I don't beat myself up over that. And I don't want any parent to beat themselves up over any change that they might make. It's like, when we know better, we do better.
Mm-hmm. Totally. If you have learned a golden nugget for success or happiness that most people don't know about, what would that be?
With my family,
Um, yeah, particularly, I guess, with your family, unless there's something else that pops to mind.
I think learning how to let some things go and recognize that tomorrow's a new day. I have a saying for myself when things are not going well, or there's particularly difficult things, interactions, whatever, with the kids or with my partner, or even just my own life. I just go, okay, tomorrow's a new day. And I just allow myself to sort of let go of that, to reset, and then wake up and have a fresh start. And I think that's really important. It's important for me individually, but it's important for my kids and my spouse, as well, to go, we're not going to just drag this up. Like, okay, today didn't go great, or okay, this was an unfortunate series of events or whatever, but tomorrow's a new day and we can reset and come at it again, and to just have that grace of starting over.
I love that word grace, and just break the cycle and then have grace.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
That's so great. So this has been so amazing. I feel like all this information is so helpful. And I want to ask you if the people want to follow you. I know you have a download on your website of Do Something Better Daily for children's behavior, a challenge. I'm not sure exactly what it's called. And there's some other things on your website that are super cool. So let us know what you have to offer, people who want to follow you or learn more.
Yeah, so my website that people can go to is drbeurkens.com, DRBEURKENS.com. There's a 7-day free challenge they can take on there, which really gets into this each day, choosing from a menu of simple, tiny little changes that you can make to start improving health and relationships and all of that. So that would actually be a really great thing for people who enjoyed this conversation, kind of a springboard for that. It's a 7-day challenge. I've also got tons of articles and videos and all kinds of resources on there available for families. My book, Life Will Get Better, is a book for parents. Simple solutions to attention, anxiety, mood, and behavior challenges. So if you're a parent, which pretty much all of us deal with those things at various times, you may find the book really helpful. And again, a lot of the areas that you and I have touched on today are focused on more in depth. It's a very practical, strategy-oriented book. So people may find that to be a helpful fit for them right now. And then also I'm on Instagram and Facebook are the two primary social media platforms that I'm on. And I love engaging with people there. So come find me, join my community. I'm so happy to be connected to all of you.
Well, I'm already a fan, so I'm going to do the challenge and I'm going to start following you. This is amazing.
Awesome.
Yay. All right. So where are you zooming off to now?
I am going to zoom off to dinner with my family.
Oh, right. It's late over there.
Yeah, it's dinner time and they're all done with school and various things. And I'm going to wrap up here and I'm going to head home and we're going to have our family dinner.
Oh, that's so great. Well, thank you so much. And I hope you guys stay safe over there. I'm always concerned with everyone, wherever they are, just hoping the best for everyone. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah.
Thanks for being here. Okay, mamas, here is Dr. Nicole's book, Life Will Get Better. And she also has an online classroom with on-demand lessons that will shed light that she has learned over her 23 years of clinical experience. Okay, and stay tuned for next week because we will be hearing from Dr. Nicole again on distance learning and a lot of the social emotional aspects with that as well. And as well as from a research group called the Learning Heroes, a national research group who did surveys from parents, thousands of parents nationwide. So that'll be a really cool, interesting show. We'll learn a lot. And then next month, we're going to hear again from Dr. Nicole about the nutrition behavior connection for kids. That is going to be fascinating. So thanks so much, Dr. Nicole. We can't wait to get more of your wisdom. And for now, I'm going to leave you with something that I actually saw a lot of moms talking about. A lot of moms are wondering, where can we go eat in Maui? There are places that are closed down, places that have opened up, but we're not sure where to go. So at the end of the show here, I'm going to leave you with some images of places that are open now on the South Shore. And I'll do other locations, maybe next week and the week after. But for right now, it's the South Shore that you'll see where you can eat. So thanks so much for being here. Take care, stay safe, and be well. Aloha.
I've been all around the world, every city, every place. Always been a restless girl, but now there's a wind of change. I've never ever felt this way. Longing for you, pick up the phone. Catching a flight, I'm coming home. Back to the place I've always known. Home. Seeing you soon, I gotta run. We're gonna have a lot of fun and spending this summer alone. I'm coming home. I'm coming home. You were only like a friend. Oh, till we met the other day. Oh, didn't want the night to end. Oh, and now there's a wind of change. I never ever felt this way. You're stuck inside my mind, deep inside my mind. I think that now's the time. Longing for you, pick up the phone. Catching a flight, I'm coming home. Back to the place I've always known.